John Paul Getty once said, he was one of the richest men in America. There may be some substitute for hard facts, but if there is, I have no idea what it can be. Too many people waste valuable time and precious resources wondering what other people are thinking, intending, or doing, rather than just asking them for clarification. They make assumptions, usually assuming against themselves, and then they make decisions based on those assumptions. Successful people, on the other hand, don't waste time assuming and wondering. They simply check it out. I'm wondering if, or would it be okay too, or are you feeling? They're not afraid of rejection, so just ask. What's the fundamental problem with assuming anything? It's that people are usually the most afraid of what they don't know. Instead, they're checking into things. They assume facts that may not exist. They build prejudice around those assumptions. They make bad decisions based on these assumptions or rumours or on other people's opinions. Consider the difference when you know all the facts, the actual facts, about the situation, the person, the problem, or the opportunity. Then you can make the decisions and take actions on the basis of what is real rather than what they're making up or what you're making up. Jack Canfield once remembers a seminar where he conducted where one attendee was sitting at the back of the room. It looked like he just didn't want to be there. He looked hostile and withdrawn. That's probably me then. He had his arms crossed over his chest, totally closed off. He had everything. He looked like a permanent scowl on his face. That must be me. And it looked like he hated everything he had to say. He knew if he wasn't careful, he'd end up focusing on him and his apparent hostility to the detriment of everyone else in the room. As you can imagine, no speaker wants to hear an audience member who was forced to come to the seminar by his boss and he is unhappy with the material, or even worse, that he dislikes the speaker himself. Given this participant's body language, it would have been easy to assume that these things to be the case. Instead, Jack decided to check it out. So he approached him during the first break and said, "Can I help you? I can't help but notice you don't look like you're really in a good space just now. I was wondering if maybe the workshop wasn't working for you, or maybe you were sent here by your boss against your will and you really don't want to be here. I'm just really concerned about you." At that point, his entire demeanour shifted. He said, Oh no, I love everything you're saying, but I feel like I'm coming down with the flu and I didn't want to stay home and miss this because I knew how good it would be. It's taking every ounce of my concentration just to be here, but it's worth it because I'm getting so much out of it. Wow. If Jack hadn't asked, it could have ruined his whole day assuming the worst. How many times do you make assumptions, good or bad, without checking them out first? Don't assume without checking when a special product is due that all the parties will deliver on time. Do you assume that checking with what you're providing is what everybody needs? Do you assume without checking at the end of the meeting that everyone is clear on who is responsible for getting what action done and the items by which date? Imagine how easy it would be not to assume and instead say, "John, are you going to complete that report by next Friday?" "Right." "And Mary, are you going to get that quote from the printer by Tuesday at 5? "Right." It's usually when we assume the worst that we don't check it out. We're simply afraid of what the answer might be. If I arrive home from work and my wife has a scowl on her face, it's not very often, it's easy to assume that she's mad at me. And though I could start walking around on tiptoes, thinking I've done something wrong and anticipating a blow-up, imagine how better it would be for a relationship if I simply just said, "You don't look happy. What's going on?" The moment you begin to check it out, two things happen. First, you find out the real facts. Did you really do something wrong? Or did she just get a nasty phone call from her sister that you didn't know about? Second, you have the opinion or the option to do something about it, to help her shift her mood, if you know what's really going on behind there. This goes the same for things that might improve your quality of life. Perhaps you assume there's no way to get a ticket to the rock concert as it's too late in the day, and that you'll never get accepted into the arts program, that you can't afford the antique buffet, that you want to look great in the dining room. It's so much simpler just to ask. Check it out using phrases such as, I'm wondering if, and would it be okay if, and are you feeling, and is there a possibility of getting, or what do I have to do in order to, and what would I have to happen for you to be able to, and so on. You get the script. Another way to check out assumptions is to use the technique that Jack teaches in his couples training sessions, that you can improve your communication for relationships. He calls it the do you mean technique. Well, let's say my wife asked me to help her clean out the garage on a Saturday. No, I say. And my wife could instantly assume, Jim's mad at me. He doesn't care about my needs. He doesn't care that my car no longer fits in the garage, and so on. But with the do you mean technique, she assumes nothing, but asks what I'm really thinking instead. So, Jim, do you mean you're not going to help me with this task at all? No, I don't mean that. Do you mean that you would rather do something else? No, I don't mean that either. Do you mean that you're busy Saturday and you have something else planned and I don't know about it? Well, yes, exactly. That's what I mean. Sorry, I hadn't really told you yet, but it simply slipped my mind. Sometimes people don't immediately tell the reasons behind their answers. They just say no, with no explanation for their position. Men, there'll be no surprise here, are more likely to respond like this. But for the grace of God, go I. Whereas women will often give you the kinds of reasons why their answer is no, men will often just give you the bottom line, no details, asking, do you mean will get you a lot more clarity so that you aren't left wondering what really is going on. Checking out your assumptions improves your communications, your relationships, your quality of life, and especially your successes and your productivity at the workplace. You start getting better results. You don't show up with missing parts. You don't assume or make assumptions about what other people were going to do and they didn't do. Whenever you have inkling and if Barbara's not going to finish on time, you call Barbara, you check it out. W. Edwards Deming, the brilliant systems expert who helped post-World War II Japan manufacture automobiles, electronics, and other goods better than almost any other country on the planet, once said the first 15% of any project is the most important. This is where you need to get clear, gather data, and check things out. For example, when you get into business relationship, you determine in the beginning, in the first 15%, how you'll work together, how you resolve conflicts, what exit strategy is if somebody wants to leave, what the criteria are for determining if one of the people is not living up to his or her side of the bargain, and so on. Most of the conflicts that arise later in relationships are because people made erroneous assumptions without checking them out. They fail to get clear upfront on their agreement. Of course, the 15% rule applies to personal goals that you might pursue as well. Remember best-selling author Tim Ferriss, who once won the National Kickboxing Championship, and we spoke about it before, in just 6 weeks of training. The story behind that story is that he didn't assume anything about the rules of kickboxing. Instead, he checked out them thoroughly. He learned from his research that if you threw your opponent out the ring twice in one round, you actually won the match. Now, in kickboxing, most people think of kicking, and boxing. Ferriss, on the other hand, was a wrestler by training. So he told his coach, don't teach me how to knock someone out. Teach me how to throw my opponent out of the ring while not getting knocked out myself. That's how he won the championship. He determined the difference between what the rules actually were and what people assumed the rules actually were. In life, there are a lot of other instances where there's a space to maneuver between the rules. If you don't ask and simply assume that you can't accomplish something, it may be that you could have easily succeeded through some loophole or other hidden fact that is revealed only when you researched it. and when you checked it actually out. And I'll see you